right. Well, everybody, welcome back to Untangled. This isn't even like, I'm probably fangirling right now, right? Because this is absolutely one of my favorite people in the world. I have Oveta Sampson here. I think you and I met when you came and did a talk for Dallas Black UX. And I was like over the moon then because you were over machine learning at Google, right? So you were like that chick in AI, right? And I think at the time I was still trying to wrap my head around what AI was, dealing with all of the fears that we had at the time. Like, is this going to take my job? But when you spoke, you were able to break that down for me and the summit. That was just like, oh, no, we don't have to be scared. We just need to start learning, right? We need to start
Right.
trying and
Yes.
learning what it does. So, Oveta Sampson, thank you so much for joining us today. Just to kind of set the context a little bit. So, my audience is a mixture of people who are looking at UX, like, hey, is this something that I want to do? Right. And then those
Mhm.
early career, those pivoters, as well as those people who are like, listen, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, what else should I be thinking about? So that's kind of the span, right?
Yeah,
So
that's a wide spectrum.
it is a wide spectrum, girl. I'm meeting people all the time. So let's start with, for those who don't know, who is Oveta Sampson?
Wow, I've been trying to answer that question for 52 years. I don't, I still don't think I have an answer but holistically who I am, revolutionary thought person who's dedicated to equality and justice in everything that I try to do as a woman, as a Black woman, as a Chicagoan, as a Southsider, as a designer, as a researcher, as a business owner, and as a human being.
You have hit some of the biggest companies, right? Like the leaders in the space. So IDEO, Capital One, Google. So then you took like this gap year. And we're going to talk about the gap year. But then you were also like, I'm not done yet. So let me also start a business.
Right.
Right. And now we're the founder of Right AI. So what is
Yes.
that? What is Right AI?
Yeah. So Red I found this napkin that I wrote on like 6 or 7 years ago. And so those origin stories are true. And it came out of this sense of my mom used to say there's a right way and a wrong way to do something. I felt like we were approaching AI in a non sustainable, non ethical, non equitable, and just non humane way, like in an inhumane way. And I was talking to somebody about it and I was kind of complaining, and they were like, well, what's the right way? And so Right AI became kind of like an idea that stuck in my head, even while I was working at companies like Microsoft and Google and Capital One and consulting for other companies through IDEO, was people sometimes need to be guided to do right. It's not like they're bad people or they're kind of seeking to destroy others. It's just that they just don't know. It's like if you grow up, I grew up, I always say I'm a Reformed Catholic. I grew up in the Catholic Church, mostly because I went to Catholic school. And the idea, we studied like ethics and morality as part of our theology classes, right? So I thought everybody studied ethics and morality. And when I got to college, I realized that everybody didn't do that, right? And so this idea of creating a systematic way to approach life where you feel like you're doing the right thing, means that you have to understand what the right thing is. And
Mhm.
so that's why I named my company Right AI. I'm not saying this is the only way to make AI, and I'm certainly not saying that this is the best way or whatever, but I am saying that if you want to make AI in an equitable, non-exploitive way that doesn't exploit the fragility of humanity, then this is a way you can do it and be profitable.
Okay. I think probably it's just the speed at which people are moving, right? And
Yes,
not really, I think it's not a lot of thought put into how is this thing going to affect people, right?
correct. Yes.
So then what are some things, or in addition to your company, what are some things that people can probably have as like their North Star when they're thinking about how to use AI, and even further along the lines, understanding how that's going to impact people?
Yeah, I wrote this blog post a long time ago, back when LinkedIn first started having blog posts, and it was called Fixing the Human Problem in AI. I think one of the things that people have to realize is that AI is a tool and a technology that is pretty much a reflection of everything that humanity has to offer, and that's good and bad, right? And because AI is neither artificial or intelligent, it means that it's heavily manipulated by humanity. And the outcomes of AI are a reflection of the inputs of us that we put into it. And so often people don't realize that the hurt, harm, and generally, I would say, carelessness or recklessness that is put into commerce and capitalism these days shows up in machine learning. And not only does it show up in machine learning and outputs, but then the technology, because it is a machine that learns, takes on those toxic traits and it becomes part of the machine's blueprint and behavioral output. And so we have to work really hard to not make machines like us.
So I was getting ready for this other thing that I'm preparing for, and I heard this phrase. And I promise I'm not going to ask you a bunch of AI questions because you have
That's
huge
okay.
platforms. But when I heard it, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna make sure I ask Oveta about this." It was the words he used were synthetic innovators.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that before. And one of the things that the first thing that I do in Write AI is I level set on taxonomy.
Okay.
I think it's really important that we use words, that the words that we use, we really understand what they mean. So, for example, when people say AI is sentient, okay, the definition of sentient is feeling, not intelligence, not knowledge, not knowing, not wisdom. It's feeling. And unless I miss something in biology or other classes, machines don't feel. So they can never be sentient, right? So that's an imprecise description, right? Thinking, right? Things like that. So we have to be really careful about our word choice when we're talking about the neither artificial nor intelligent tool that has become to be known as AI. So when somebody says synthetic innovation, that's an oxymoron because innovation in itself is organic. If you really understand what the word innovation means, it's wrapped up in creativity, right? It's looking at an old problem and finding a new solution, right? It's taking something that is at A and turning it into something B. And that takes creativity, that takes thought, that takes all kinds of things. And it's the antithesis of being synthetic. Innovation is an organic process and methodology.
Right.
It happens in the seams of tools, people, and products. So to say that anything is synthetic innovation is an oxymoron and an untruth.
And I bring it up because I'm worried about people attaching themselves again, using words and they don't understand what it is, right? And it's like at its core, innovation is exactly what you said. It is creating something new that didn't exist before. And
Right.
all the machines can do is tell you what it knows, right? It could be creative, not even creative, things that you may not be aware of, but
Yeah.
it's not new, right?
Yeah, and I think I do think that we have to be really careful. Again, we have to be really careful about being precise in our language because we're at a time in humanity where the understanding of concepts are changing. The definition of fact is changing. It used to be very clear what was a fact, right? But if you go on TikTok and watch somebody's video, they will tell you the earth is flat. It used to be very clear what was truth, right? We used to have very clear definitions of truth and not truth. We used to have very clear definitions of good and bad. We used to have very clear definitions, all these things. And so we're at a point where all of those, a lot of terms like thinking, reasoning, intelligence, creativity, innovation are being, I would say, hijacked by some marketers to
Mm,
promote their agenda.
mm,
And so one of the things that Write AI loves to do is to define and describe the model development process so that people understand how this tool that's neither artificial or intelligent is made. So once you take the black box, which most people think of AI as an entity that they don't really understand, but they can engage with. It's kind of like your car. If you're not a mechanic, you're just kind of like, hey, I put the key in and it goes. And if something like stutters, you're like, oh Lord, what's going on? But you don't really need to know about combustible engines or, electric batteries or lithium or anything like that. You're just like the car runs, right? It's the same thing with artificial intelligence. People know the concept of a car, but they don't really understand how it runs. So at Ride AI, I work directly with CEOs and people in the C suites who you are not the president or the CEO or the leader of a company because you're not intelligent yourself or you're not smart, but you're also smart enough to know when there are gaps. And so I fill in those gaps by unveiling, looking under the hood and pointing out all the parts that makes this neither artificial or intelligent tool work.
Hmm.
And so that's one of the first things I do. I do what I call the C suite AI understanding. And then I look at their company and I say, how well are you equipped to implement this neither artificial or intelligent tool in a way that doesn't exploit the fragility of humanity? And then we
Okay.
go and talk about that.
Yeah.
And we develop strategies about that. I do talent assessment. I do infrastructure assessment. I do system architecture assessment. I assess their AI products and roadmaps. I help them to develop an AI implementation strategy. And I do it in a way that I call the right way to do AI, that is mindful of the human engagement risks that can come out of humans engaging with machines.
And do y'all talk through those risks? Because again,
Yes.
it's that big awareness thing, right? Understand
Yes.
how this is going to impact.
Yeah, and when I started this conversation by saying, "You cannot expect people to know right and wrong." When I was younger, I was like, "Well, mama, why do they act like that? Because you don't let me act like that, you know." And she was like, "Some people just don't know right and wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to teach them, right?
Yeah.
This is what we have to do with machines. Machines are born with no moral code." I think it's hilarious that people expect a generative pre-trained, that's what GPT stands for, to be accurate.
Hmm.
Why would you expect it to tell the truth? It doesn't know what truth is, right? And so I think it's really important that when I say write I am working with business owners to show them an alternative narrative that they're not getting from the current conversation around this neither artificial or intelligent tool.
So I told you I'm not going to ask you too many questions, right?
No, that's okay. This is my thing. So,
But let me tell it absolutely is your thing. So let me tell you. So I was, I don't know, 6 months ago, I'm scrolling on LinkedIn and Ovetta is in Africa. Ovetta, what you I'm scrolling and she's somewhere else. I was like, baby is on world tour. So you're on what you're calling a gap year. So what is
yeah,
a
I'm
gap year?
supposed to be on a gap year,
Yeah, because
and
you're still working because you're here talking to me. But
yeah,
right,
I was talking to my friend Andrew yesterday, and I was telling him all the things I was doing on my gap year, and he was like, "This is not a gap year. You obviously don't know what that means." But the gap, okay, so traditional gap year was when I was growing up was I went to a private school, so a lot of the students that I went to had a gap year. So that was the year between when you graduated from high school and when you started what was to be your adult stuff like college or whatever. Malia took a gap year, I think, and all
she
that.
did.
So
She did.
we've evolved. But I wanted to do that when I was younger. My mom was like, "No, you going to college? You ain't staying here. You packing your bags. You got a scholarship. You're going to college. There is no gap for you." And so I realized the other day that I've been working since I got my first summer job when I was like 13 or 14. And I haven't stopped since. I never had a gap year. I never had a gap in employment. And so after being in tech and AI for about 10, I guess it's almost almost 15 years now, I did the trajectory, right? I started at IDEO, I went to Microsoft, I went to Capital One, became a VP, became a executive at Google. And I was doing all the boxes, but then my mother died, and I started thinking, what have I done for Ovetta? I was a caretaker for my mom. I was a UX leader or whatever that means. I was mentoring a lot of folks. I was speaking at all of these conferences. But I had this real urge to be like, you know what? I want to stop and reflect a little bit about what this next chapter is for me. And I didn't see myself working at another company again, for someone else. And so that was a real shock to me. And so after my mom died, I went back to work, but I wasn't feeling as fulfilled. I was getting frustrated that they're not doing things the right way, is what I kept saying. And then I was like, well, you have the power to show people what the right way is, and you don't have to do it here. And so Google and I had a amicable divorce over irreconcilable differences, right? We left, we parted our ways. And instead of jumping back into a company or a job or whatever, I decided to take a break. I decided, I wanted to get back to reflect on myself and what I wanted to do in the next phase. I was feeling a little lost. I wrote today, like after my mom died, I felt like I was in a boat that was aimlessly crossing a body of water heading towards land, and the land mysteriously moved. It disappeared. That's how I felt when my mom died. And so I was just at this point where I was like, I did all the things. I did all the things that you're supposed to do to be successful. And I still don't feel like I've really fulfilled my purpose. So I wanted to take time to think about that. And at that time, I've been supporting this missionary couple for 10 years and his lovely wife. And she's a OBGYN, and Dean's a pastor. And 10 years ago, they moved to Kenya and they started supporting this rural hospital in the middle of Kenya called Tenwick. And he sent me an email. We worked together back when I was working at Compassion International. And he sent me an email and said, "Hey, will you support us? We're trying to train." It was also a medical school, so they were trying to train Kenyans to be doctors. And so they had this hospital, they have this residency program, and all this kind of stuff. Volunteer doctors come, and he said, "Will you support us?" And I said, "Sure." So every month for 10 years or whatever, I was giving money. And then he sent me an email right after I left Google and said, "Hey, if you're going to come to Kenya," because I had been threatening to come to Kenya to see the work, right? He was like, "If you're going to come to Kenya, we're retiring. And this is the last summer we're going to be here.
Come now.
Come now." So
Yeah.
this picture right here is me, I took, we were on safari one day. The sun was about to set, and when I went to Kenya. So I went to Vietnam on a swim trip. I went to Kenya, went to London. I'm going to Barcelona. I'm going to South Africa. I just decided I was going to lean into travel. And then I got a phone call right before I went to Kenya from a CEO of a company here in Chicago. And he's like, "I've been trying to get on your calendar for years. I respected you a lot. I know that you're kind of on a gap year, but I have this AI plan that I want to do, and I want to talk to you about it." And thus began Write AI. So I had already built the website and everything when I left, right before I left for Vietnam. So it wasn't like I wasn't thinking about it, but I literally had no plans to start working on it until 2026. But then I got this call from the CEO, and I thought, oh, I can do this. I can do this with other companies. And so my gap year turned into a wonderful reflective year where I said I was going to put the energy into what I want to do and the legacy I want to leave in AI and UX, on my own terms. And so that's what this year and hopefully next decade is about.
So a couple things, like you said, one, I don't know when I've seen somebody who looks like us take a gap year, right? So
I know.
I was excited about that,
It's a
but
blessing.
the moment that I was like, okay, she's really locked in, and I'm glad that you have this background. I appreciated that you were actually sitting in those moments, right? Like you were
Yes.
taking pictures and experiencing the things, because like you said, if and I don't know if you remember this or have even thought about it, but I met you right after your mom passed. right?
Yes, right.
It
I
was
remember
right after.
because you were talking about, well, maybe you don't want to come to Dallas. And I was
Yeah, do
like,
you
no,
need a minute? And you're
no,
like, "No,
I was
I'm
like,
okay."
no, I'm good. I'm good. But I wasn't. I wasn't good.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know I wasn't good. I was keeping myself busy to not go into the dark places. And I didn't mourn. My mom was my person. I took care of my mom for over 10 years. So I knew inevitably she was going to transition. But in my logical brain, I never thought I would be on this earth without my mother,
Yeah.
without being able to talk to her, to tell her what was going on in my life. I always used to say, I used to tell people, I said, may you have the love that allowed my mom to light up the way she did when I walk into a room. May you just have a fraction of that. Because when I walked into a room, it was like the sun came out for my mom, right? And that's a love it's agape love. It's agape love real Christians will understand what I mean by that. It's the type of love that's sacrificial, non-transactional, 100% relational, and 100% giving
Mhm.
without the moment of receipt. And so after I went back to work, I did the speaking gigs, I did all the things, but I really wanted to sit in what it meant to not have this wonderful person physically present in my life. And I had missed the things that I did when I was broke and poor and not this leader or whatever. When I was working with missionaries and I was traveling the world and writing stories of people who found hope even in the midst of war and suffering, and meeting all of these amazing people. And I thought that was my life before I got into this UX, tech, AI space. And that was so much more fulfilling. And now I'm blessed to be able to just recreate that and not have to worry about money.
Yeah.
That was the gap year. That's the gap year, right? I can go and I can hang out with missionaries and I can speak at schools and I can support the new, ICU NIC unit that they're building for these babies in Kenya. Their cardiothoracic center in the middle of rural Kenya, which is gorgeous and wonderful. I can travel to those places and be in those spaces and not have the anxiety or worry about my own personal finances or survival. And so that's the blessing of a gap year. That's what people don't really understand. Like they think it's like, oh, it's just rich white people doing that stuff. But really, what a gap year is not having to be worried about your survival and leaning in to your passion and purpose.
So thinking about that, because everybody's not gonna be able to do that, right? Thinking
Well,
about that,
I think people could do it more if they planned.
if they plan for it, right?
Yeah, like it's
What
not like I did this gap year on a whim, right?
right.
Like I had to plan not to have a salary that's planning. You can't just, well, if you Oprah, you probably could, but
Yeah.
like most of us can't just do a gap year. Like you have to plan that, right? And I feel like my gap year, just like when I did Ironman and I met Sophia, who's the first Black person, she's a woman, first Black person to summit Everest, right? And we were on a TED Talk panel together, and she was like, I'm so in awe of you because you did an Ironman, because she can't swim. It made me realize that everybody has an Everest,
Yeah.
right? Has a version. So everybody should have a version of a gap year,
Yeah.
right? And maybe your gap year doesn't look like Melanie Hobbs, right? Like George Lucas's, Melanie and George, right? On Martha's Vineyard somewhere where you don't have to worry about money. But maybe it does look like, you know what? I'm going to save enough money for a year so that I can lean into writing my book, or lean into spending more time with our kids, or lean into teaching at that school in the inner city that I really want, that I volunteer at, or lean in being a literacy tutor, or lean in things that the capitalist rat race doesn't want you to lean into. That's what this gap year is about. It was about all the things that I wanted to do, but I was distracted by climbing corporate ladders and I couldn't do it. Writing my book, building my business, showing people the right way, speaking at conferences. My therapist was like, "You like to solve problems and teach others. So are you doing that every
Yeah.
day?" Right.
Yeah.
So that's what the gap year is supposed to be about. So it could be theoretical, it could be literal, but it really is about questioning whether you are leaning into who you are and your passion and purpose. Because when people lean into who they are and their passion and purpose, the world is better for it.
Yeah. One of the things that I also took away from that, I laughed at you like I laugh at my husband. So my husband is a retired vet, okay? Did 20 years in the
Uh-huh.
Air Force. This man gets up every day
Stories.
before
Service.
dawn, right? And gets dressed up like he has somewhere to be. He's the busiest retired person I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, habitual, right?
Yeah. But I saw that a lot of that in you, right? So like you're on this gap year, you're taking this time, but it feels like, at least on the outside looking in, you kind of boiled it down to the things that matter most to you. And some of
Yes.
that, a lot of that is still what you've been doing as your profession, but then it also has these kind of other elements. So
Yeah.
at what point did you realize in this reflective moment, like, some of these things I've been doing for work are just part of me? They are just part of who I am as a person.
Yeah, I think it's not so much that when I left my corporate job that I became something different. It's just that I brought who I was to the corporate world. I kept feeling like Sisyphus. It was Sisyphonian, I guess. I don't know. It just felt like I remember my mentor said, "You're fighting the cog, not the wheel, but the cog, the thing that keeps the wheel together. You're fighting that." And he was like, "As long as you know that, this is not an easy road, right?" And so I felt like I was bringing who I was, my values, my way of moving and navigating the world to the corporate world, and I was just it was 100% friction fire. And I remember distinctly the moment when me and my VP were going at it, and he said, what you're doing is not indicative of what we want as a leader." And I thought, thank you, because that means I don't belong here. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with me, because prior to that, that's what I was feeling. But in that moment, I was like, I could hear my mother's voice saying, that means you don't belong there. And that is a really profound way of understanding who you are and your passion and purpose. And understanding that it's not meant for people who don't value it. And the flip side of that is when that CEO called me and I had a workshop at his company. And I was going through all the things that I know, still being authentically me. And the next day, he said two things. He said, "I learned more from you in the one day that I have learned in years. And secondly, you're not charging me enough."
Mm,
So, in those two things, he showed me where I do belong and where I do have value. He reinforced that. So instead of me pushing a boulder up a hill that don't want me to be there, I decided to seek out the meadows where my flower grows.
yeah. And it's important to be aware and okay with that, right?
Yeah, because what we're taught is you must assimilate I remember I was a manager and I remember doing one-on-ones, and I remember my direct reports would be like, "I don't know if I want to be a blank company level, Microsoft level 64 or Google level 8 or whatever." And I said, "We should talk about what you want to achieve as a designer and human being, and not use the language of the company to talk about your success."
Yeah.
That's Google language about what it is to be an executive. What does success look like for your own career? And to do that, I would say you are getting a lifetime achievement award. Write the introduction that the person is going to speech, the introductory speech that the person is going to say when you're giving that award.
I love
That's
that.
how we're going to plan your career.
I love that. Because
And
the
your
reality
career
is,
should not be reflective of the language of corporate America. It
right,
should be reflective about what your passion and purpose is and what success means to you.
right.
And people got it twisted. And I never got it twisted. All of those companies were in service of what Ovetta wanted to do. It was never, hey, I want to work at Microsoft, or I want to work at Capital One, or I want to work at IDEO, or I want to work at Google. It was always, I want to make AI equitable, sustainable, and ethical, and democratize it so that marginalized groups can have agency with it. I want to make the black box a glass box. I want to empower people to use this technology for what they want to use it for, and not be told that they have to use it for XYZ. And I want to lift the veil off the seemingly secretive and mysterious technology that is only in the hands of the 1% of the one.
Yeah.
That has always been my number one passion and goal, which is why 6 years ago, I've been teaching AI product design for 8 years now at DePaul. And in that lecture, I show a photo of the 11 white men who got together. John McCarthy wrote the proposal to Dartmouth in 1955 for them to come together and invent artificial intelligence. It was a term that they coined there. It was a definition of having machines think, see, move, behave like humans. And they decided, the audacity, that they were going to create artificial intelligence in that way, in their own narrative. And the only reason why they called it artificial intelligence was because they were trying to usurp the cybernetics movement, right? And so when I say that it's neither artificial or intelligent, what I mean by that is it is a script that has been written for humanity about this technology. And if it had been designed in this way, it could be redesigned in the way that I see the world. And that's why I said I want to redo that summit. And I want to bring in people who have my understanding, who have different perspectives on the world. And I want to reimagine AI
So that's
in
the
our
summit.
image.
That's the summit that you have coming up, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So
So
six
tell
years
us
ago,
about the summit. Yes.
6 years ago, I saw that photo of 11 white men and I didn't see myself. And I said, you know what? I want to redo this, except for I want it to be people who understand artificial intelligence, who are making it and creating it, to come together. And I want the world to see an alternative version of what AI could be. And that's what reimagining AI in our own image is about. It's a summit in Atlanta, October 23rd to the 25th. It's hybrid, both in person and virtual. I am co-hosting it with Jamaica Burge, who is such a treasure. And she was recently emancipated as well. And she is now at Spelman. Shout out to HBCUs. And they are working with us to help to I think we're going to have Spelman students there, which is going to be awesome. And it's a gathering of all the people that I've met over time who are doing what I call AI in the right way, in a very mindful way, mindful of humanity, mindful of equity, mindful of sustainability. And they're doing it. So the key to this summit, and this is what I had to tell the marketer that we hired, because she was like, how is this different than other places? The key to this summit is that every speaker, every workshop presenter, every panelist is a builder, a creator, and a doer. There are no talking heads here. And each one is committed to using and creating this tool in the most humane way. And they're going to show you how. So if you feel defeated by what you hear about AI, by the exploitative nature of it, by the narrative done by the oligarchs and the bros in Silicon Valley, and do you not see a way for AI to be equitable, sustainable, and ethical, then come to Reimagining AI, because we will reimagine this tool for you and how it can be created by us in ways that keeps the fragility of humanity from being destroyed.
Who is this conference for?
This conference is for the disillusioned, the exasperated, the frustrated, the intelligent, and the folks who know that there has to be another way, but haven't seen it yet. The folks who want to do, the folks who want to move from thoughts to things, the builders, the creators. That's who it's for. Because I am very adamant that everybody that is speaking at this conference is leaving you with pragmatic, practical things that you can put into practice as a designer, as a researcher, as a CEO, as a marketer, anyone who wants to use AI to not only be humane, but also profitable. So I'm having a CEO panel, and I'm 5 CEOs who are AI based companies or using AI in a humane way and are profitable. We're having a research panel to talk about ethical and valuable research methods for AI. I'm doing my first ever deconstructing AI workshop where I deconstruct some of the what went wrongs AI, and we redesign them together using my mindful AI principle framework. And I just think, and also it's an excuse to me get together with some of the just the baddest people around. I mean, Vivian, Vincent, Chad. I mean, the list is Jamaica,
I
Bruce.
saw it. I was like,
I
wait,
mean,
do
it's
I need to get
fire,
down to
right?
Atlanta? I feel like I need to
It's
get down to
fire.
Atlanta.
It
Yeah,
is fire. It is
it is
fire, right?
amazing.
The people who are coming is amazing. And they don't do a lot of these conferences. And so shout out to all of them who said yes to me.
Yeah.
I feel honored and privileged. And I cannot ask for a better partner in Jamaica. We just have been really aligned on how we want this. And let me be clear. Reimagining AI in our own image is a summit, but it's just the beginning. I'm leaning 100% in to folks who want to be ethical, sustainable, and equitable in the practice of AI, and companies and people and all those things. And this is the forum, this is the village that I'm building around it.
So I want to be mindful of your time, Ovetta. So I will ask you one final question. Is there,
Mhm.
thinking about the UXers and the people who are
Yeah.
thinking about, what's next for them, is there any advice, anything else you would want to leave with my audience?
Yeah, I think here's what I want to say. If that task, trip, moment, book, presentation, company, whatever that thing you've been putting off for fear of financial instability, insecurity, job loss, all these things, you will have financial insecurity, instability, job loss, even if you have a job. Right. So my thing is take the time to lean into things that you think are important. Don't let the language and narratives of others dictate your legacy.
I think the one thing that I'm gonna have everybody do from here on out is that exactly what you said. If you were writing that intro paragraph to your Lifetime Achievement Award, what do you hope it says? Like, this
Yeah.
gave me
And
goosebumps.
then, because if you do that little paragraph, I didn't ask for a book, just that little intro speech. That's why I asked for the intro speech, not the speech itself. Just what does that introductory speech say about you? Then, if you write that down, that becomes your blueprint for the
Yeah.
next 30 years of your life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Ovetta, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Yes. Thank
I
you for asking. Oh my God.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm gonna make sure that we drop the links to the summit so that they can register, and make sure that they follow you on LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else you want them to follow you?
Yeah, so my manager told me I had to build a mailing list. So if you go to my website, ovetasampson.com, you can join my mailing list. And there, if you join, I'll send you my mindful AI playbook, which is the 10 heuristics of doing mindful AI for free. And yeah, and then I'll send you, and then you'll get updates and newsletters and information about all the stuff that Right AI is doing and previews of stuff. So yeah, please go to ovetasampson.com and sign up and keep in touch.
Well, thank you, Ovetta. It's good to see you. We'll have to catch up deeper soon.
Yes,
But I am so
yes.
excited to have gotten to chat with you today. I'm
Thank
excited
you so
for you
much.
and all the things that you are doing. Thank you
Thank you
for
so
sharing
much.
your pictures and your journey. Again, just seeing it, I was like, yes, now I'm super involved. So, all right, you
Thank
have
you.
a good one, okay?
Okay, you too. Bye bye.